Romeo and Juliet is not a love story wrecked by bad luck. It is a city that burns through its own teenagers.
Yes. People shrink the play into romance and fate because that sounds neat. The play itself is uglier. Verona is run by a feud, an honor code, and adults who fail when it matters.
So, the tragedy is not just two impulsive kids making bad choices.
Exactly. Romeo and Juliet make choices, but they make them inside a social world that trains speed, secrecy, and violence. The system is already loaded before they even meet.
Start with the feud, because people often treat it like background noise. Just the old family problem.
It is not background. The first scene opens with servants ready to fight in the street over inherited hatred they barely understand. That tells you the poison is social before any main character speaks.
And that matters because if servants are brawling on command, the younger generation has inherited a script.
Right. No one asks whether the feud makes sense. They perform it. You defend the family name, you answer insult with force, and you do it because that is what your world calls honor.
Which sounds noble until you notice it gets people killed fast.
Fast and stupidly. Look at Tybalt. He sees Romeo at the Capulet feast and goes straight to retaliation. Later, when Romeo refuses to fight after the secret marriage, Mercutio treats restraint as shameful. In this culture, backing down looks weak.
So, honor here is not moral seriousness. It is social pressure with a sword in its hand.
That is the clean way to put it. Honor culture in this play rewards overreaction. Tybalt cannot let an insult pass. Mercutio cannot tolerate Romeo seeming soft. Romeo himself gets pulled into that logic after Mercutio dies and kills Tybalt in a rush of revenge.
And once Romeo does that, the whole structure tightens. Exile, panic, no open way forward.
Yes, because the public world is hostile, so private life has to go underground. That is where secrecy grows. Not because secrecy is thrilling, but because honesty is blocked.
That is a key correction. People talk as if the secret marriage is just teenage drama.
It is survival logic inside a hostile system. Juliet cannot openly choose Romeo because the feud makes him untouchable. Her father moves to marry her off to Paris without reading her at all. The friar starts managing everything in private because normal channels are broken.
And the more secrecy they need, the more fragile the plan becomes.
Exactly. One hidden marriage leads to one hidden night together, one desperate plan, one failed message, one tomb. Secrecy is not a side issue. It is what people use when authority cannot protect them.
Let us stay with authority, because the adults in this play are often treated as wise, but unlucky. That is much too kind.
Much too kind. Capulet is volatile and controlling. He jokes and hosts a party early on, then turns brutal when Juliet refuses Paris. Lady Capulet is emotionally absent. The nurse helps Juliet, but not steadily. When things turn dangerous, she tells Juliet to marry Paris anyway.
So even the adults, who seem close to her, fold under pressure.
Yes, the support system is thin, inconsistent, and self-protective. Friar Lawrence means well, but he keeps trying to solve public violence with private tricks. That is not wisdom. That is crisis management in a collapsing moral order.
And the prince? He is the official authority in Verona. Does he control anything?
Barely. He threatens punishment after the opening brawl. But the violence keeps returning. Mercutio dies. Tybalt dies. Romeo is banished. Order exists in speeches, not in practice. The rulers are always behind the damage.
Which brings us to the tomb, where people usually zoom in on tragic romance and stop there.
That is too small. The final deaths expose the whole society. Juliet is driven to fake death because her family will not hear her. Romeo reaches the tomb because the message system fails. Paris dies there too, another casualty of the same arrangement. The pile of bodies is social evidence.
And only then do the adults finally see what their world has produced.
Yes, but notice how late that recognition comes. The feud ends only after the young are dead. That is not reconciliation to celebrate. It is a public confession that the old order has consumed its children.
So when people say the play is about fate, that misses where the pressure really comes from.
Fate language is in the play, but it should not let the society off the hook. Shakespeare shows repeated human choices shaped by feud, honor, and failed authority. The catastrophe is built socially before it is sealed personally.
Which means, Romeo and Juliet are not just victims of destiny. They are casualties of a culture that makes decent action almost impossible.
That is the point. This play does not just ask why two teenagers die. It shows a world so poisoned that it teaches them how to die before it teaches them how to live.